Hey everybody, this is Tim with Doc's Autos. We're down in our frozen shop in the middle of December, but if you like classic car restorations, maybe muscle car restorations, or maybe you like bringing back salvage cars from auction and rebuilding them like our 2015 BMW X5, consider hitting the subscribe button below. Today we are working on the 1938 Plymouth, the 38 Special, and from the last video, if you remember, we were working on repairing the area around where the fender met the running board. And I started version 1 of the patch, and I wasn't terribly happy with it, so I made another one. This one here has a whole lot better fit and finish, and I did go ahead and weld it on off camera just because there was a lot of fitting back and forth, actually quite a bit, to get fit on where it was, even though everything was templated out. It just wasn't quite the same. Anyways, we've got a little more filling to do in here and just a little bit of cleanup work, but the important thing is I got this rolled edge here with some round bar for the bottom of the fender. Everything is upside down, of course. We've got a little bit of rust that I want to fill back in here. It's a little patch, and then this one's going to be close to paint, or at least primer. Get it cleaned up for primer. But today we're going to work on finishing the removal of these dents here and over here in the front. And for that, I brought up a bag of our Media Blast out of the shop because, well, we're not going to sandblast in the middle of winter. So my theory is we lay this down on the media bag. We have our body hammers, and we're going to lightly tap and try and work out some of these dents over here and over here. I think I've got to run down to the shop and pick up a strap. I want to try and pinch this back in where it goes. I don't want to hammer this because this is where that lip is, and I don't want to cave that in, and there is a little bit of a roll right here. So if I can hopefully pinch it right here, pull it in, that should get us cleaned up. And then over here, you can see we are bowed in a little bit. Maybe about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. We need to bring this out. So see what we can do with that. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and set her down on our media bag and see what we can come up with. Now I can already tell this is gonna be a challenge because I'm sitting this half of it on my Craftsman rolling stool precariously. And yeah, so we're just gonna give it some taps here and see how we do. I almost couldn't find this one when I went back to the front of the fender because I had knocked most of it out. So we're just gonna give it some taps and see if we can push it out just a hair more without beating the crap out of it. You know, that's actually turning out pretty darn good. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but I've got a little crease right here. Oh, here, way at the bottom. Let me try this again. All right, that's actually working out pretty well. I'm not sure if you can see it in the camera, but there is some dust marks. There's a little bit of a crease right in this area. Around in here is looking really good. I don't really have a good reference point since I don't have my dolly on this side. I mean, I could, but we've got just a little bit of a high spot here. So I can probably take my dolly and hammer that down from the back side. But otherwise, just this little area right here is really all I'm looking for. And you can, yeah, I guess you can see that pretty well in the camera. A little crease here, and then right in here is a little bit left. So I'm gonna do a little more hammering down here on the sandbag and then move it back up to the other dent in the back of the fender. Yeah, that feels really good up here. Have to do a little work back up on the stand, but let me go take a look. Take a look back here. These are some of the bigger dents you can clearly see in the light. So I want to try and bring this area out a little bit. Probably, I don't know, a good 3/8 of an inch right in this area. And you can see it where the main part of the crease is. It's all got to get pushed out. So I guess let's give it a try on this side. Well, it's a start, but it's going to need more back up on the table. Sandbag is nice, but eventually it conforms to what you're hitting on, and you can actually hear. Well, you can't, but I can. The difference in the metal when you hit it with a hammer, whether it's kind of hollow sounding behind it, if there's a space between the metal and the bag, or if I'm hitting directly metal on the bag. So I got to bring it up to the table, work this a little more, and then we'll see how we're looking. Okay, well, we are making some progress on our front fender here. Managed to get this side straightened out a bit. Honestly, laying it on the sandbag, putting my knee into it, and just give it some pressure, kind of just warping and bending the rest of the fender to help get this curve out. Also a little bit of help from the dead blow hammer. Just taking some shots on the back, pushing it out. Got a little buckle that wants to now poke in and out. So I'm going to take some more hits on it, just sort of working my way to the center, and hopefully that will stay out. That's actually a lot better than it was. And we've got most of this contour figured out. Just a little spot here, it's got a little whoop that I want to try and straighten out. We'll see if I can get that done, but again, I don't want to pinch this edge here, this roll. Up in the front here, we're looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. I put my knee into the back side of this a little bit as well, just to try and give it some good broad area and some pressure behind it to push this out without trying to make any huge blows with the hammer and have any high spots on the outside of the fender, because then I've got to go back, hit it from this side. It becomes a never-ending battle from inside or outside. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and just whack on this a little bit, so cue the time lapse. All right, well, that came out about, well, probably better than I was expecting with the amount of effort I threw into it. Of course, we're gonna get this all stripped down, throw on some primer, then we can throw on a little bit of guide coat and see where we need some skim. I don't know that I'm actually gonna need any filler on here. This thing came out pretty well. There's just a few areas that you're gonna need a little assistance for a little extra smoothing. And if it turns out I do have to add in a little bit of filler, it's not gonna be much. You know, metal is old, it's thick, not like newer cars where you can take a couple whacks at it and it either pops into place or it's really bad. But I don't want to stretch this too much and get it out of shape and warped and have this pucker in here still come back to haunt us later down the road. But overall, this area that was, you know, from earlier in the video, or last video, this was pushed in a good inch and a half maybe, and dented in. And we got that out, I think, to a reasonable place where we can just finish with some filler or a little bit of skim and call it good. Up on the front, we got this knocked out as well. Very good. The only place of concern is, again, right here. There's a little bit of a kink, and I may try and apply just a little heat to it and see if I can bend it back. But again, I don't want to do too much on it for fear of, you know, I'm sure this stuff is a little brittle and cracking, because that would be more work. So I may just use my map torch and heat it up just so slightly. There's a tiny little kink in here that you're really not going to look at or see unless you're looking at it from the underside. Same for the little guy back here. But I'm going to do my best to see if I can get them straightened out just a hair more, so it's as good as it can be with what we've got to work with. Most people would have probably thrown these fenders away and found something, fiberglass replacements, you know, something else, or cut out entire areas and tried to reshape it, the English wheel, planishing hammer, anything like that. I don't have a planishing hammer, and the shop is cold, and I'm not really in the mood to make giant patches when this stuff is going to be pretty good for the final product when it's all done and painted. Again, a little skim coat goes a long ways. We're not going to pack this thing through full of filler and make it a Bondo Queen. Keep that to a minimum and make it look good. So I'm going to work on these little kinks here. Not going to record that. It's going to be experimentation, fiddling around, and you'll get bored. Anyways, the next step after this is I'm going to go ahead on this back area here, spin around again. Back here, this thing needs wheels on it. Anyways, back here I'm going to go ahead, fill on a couple of spots in the welds, get that ground down, and get this also ready for a little bit of skim. And then before we do any filler or skim coat, I'm going to strip everything down, take off this inner engine bay panel, and get all of our bad paint, metal cleaned up, snarbus in here, dirt, undercoating, tar, 90 years of stuff. And yeah, 80 some years of stuff. And get it ready so we can throw some primer on it. Again, this little shield for the engine bay is going to get hit with the Eastwood chassis black, aside from the color on here. But for now, everything is just going to get primed. Well, we've been working on this back end here quite a bit, working on putting a little more fill in here, getting this whole area here where it mates up to the running board, much more smoothed out. Overall, just kind of knocking a little bit more on these dents. And, you know, overall it looks really good from where we started. If you don't remember, here's what it looked like before. And now it looks 95% better. Hopefully we'll be able to get that last 2% with a little bit of skim coat and finish work here. It may not be 105% perfect, but it's going to look about 98.3% better than it was when we started. The next thing for me to do is I'm going to keep my Elgin earbuds in here and get to stripping everything off of here. I'm going to start with the inside, take the wire brush, knock all the dirt and crud off the inside. I've already started making a pile by my feet. And then go through probably with the little purple disky things. These things here, the strip discs, and work on pulling off the rest of the paint on the outside. Contour tool, the SCT might be a little challenging because this is so curvy. I'll give it a try. But I think a lot of areas, especially on here, the strip disc is gonna work really well. So I'm gonna spare you that time lapse and coma-inducing boredom and take care of it myself. Just keep cranking out the 80s hair bands and, not hair bands, but hair bands. And see where we get. The ultimate goal for the end of this video here is to be in primer, so that's what we're working towards. Well, that was fun and extremely messy, as you can see. We got everything stripped off, and it looks like maybe I'm gonna restore a DeLorean. Now, anyways, there's a few spots. There's other dimples in here I found just in a few little spots. And overall, there's a couple of high spots I found. So run my hand over it. So I'll probably take my hammer and dolly real quick, mark the spots I find, tap them down real quick, and move on. The only big thing I found was two, one down here and one up here. Looks like little pitting and rust spots starting to come through, so I would go address those. And then this area back here where the dent was actually looks really good without any paint on it. And this area up front here also looks really good. I mean, I really can't, I can feel little spots, but I can't tell, I can't see any big protrusions, hammer marks, anything else like that from where I was beating on it. So that's a bonus in my mind. Really, like I said, what I've got to do, flip it over, take out that inner panel that butts up against the engine bay, and then touch up these few little pinholes that came out as I was removing paint, and then we're ready to get primed. Now, could I have just scuffed and painted over what was there? I could have, but why? We're going through the work to fix the dents, replace the damaged metal on the back by the running board, and as evidence, as I took off paint, I found some pitting here. There are some other, just some dirty-ish metal, and I'm finding some of these high spots and a couple of low spots. Again, it's do a job that you're going to be proud of, and so far this is looking pretty good to me. So yeah, we'll go ahead, touch up these last couple of places here, and get that rear, that inner panel off. I've had them soaking, the nuts and bolts soaking in penetrant for probably 2 weeks now, but I don't know that they're going to come off easily. It's a flat stud that goes through to a nut, so I may end up having to cut them off. So we'll see, and when we get everything else cleaned up, we'll come back when we're ready to put on our primer. Well, it's the next day for me, and I've gotten ahead and gotten all of the little welding and pinholes taken care of on the fender, and the inner fender got removed, and got the surfaces of that all cleaned up, ready for primer. And I'm just waiting for my lacquer thinner and spray away cleaners to go ahead and flash off the fender before I go ahead and start priming. Now, notice the shop is still kind of a mess, and that's okay. We're throwing on just a couple of coats of high build primer and letting it sit. I know full well I have to come back and do some metal work, some filler and some glaze, but I want to make sure the metal is protected since it's going back down to the shop after we're done with it here. I don't want to let it sit out in the open bare metal and let it expose to, you know, winter, temperature changes, humidity, possible moisture dripping on it. Just get that bare metal over here protected so that when we do have time to bring it back up here this winter to take care of the couple little bits of body work on it, it's ready to go, and we can throw some guide coat on it, sand it, and let it go. Now, the reason for throwing on a couple of coats of primer ahead of time, building it up so that I can bring it up here and not have to worry about, going over one thin layer of primer with my guide coat. That's it, that's the word, the guide coat. And I can do some sanding, some filling, and get it pretty good so that when we come back, probably in the spring when everything is warmer and I've got time to be back in the shop, we can take everything as a whole for the vehicle, hopefully do a final assembly pre-painting, go over any other issues for fitment or dings or anything else I didn't notice up until that point. Put a final layer of primer on everything, hit it with our sealer, and then get into the paint and clear. Now that's all going to be done up here, but I can at least do a lot more work back down in the shop once it's warmer and not make a complete mess out of the garage, because after this, it may take 2 or 3 hours to sweep the floors and get all the sanding, grinding dust off everything, and I haven't gotten smart enough and just built drop curtains over here yet. So maybe that'll be my next project. Who knows? Anyways, I'm gonna grab the GoPro and get set up to get our primer going, and we'll come back right then. We are primed and ready to go. Let's take a quick look at the panels. Now, like I said before, we are far from being done with these. I just wanted to get some, protectant on it, primed up so they're protected from the elements in the winter here. You can see we've still got a couple little, dings to deal with, little pockmark there. But by and large, where these giant dents were at the beginning of the video here, right in here, giant pucker was in there, and then up here, there was a big dent in here too, and even with just some primer on them, they are 95% better. I mean, this little pockmark sticks out more for me to my eye than the dents do now. So that is pretty impressive if you ask me. Now, of course, we've still got blocking to do. We're not going to skip any of those parts. So that's to be done later down the road. We've got our inner panel here for our engine bay. This is the inner part here. This is going to end up being the glass, the chassis black. I thought about putting that on today as well as the underside of the fender, but that'll be another day. This is the fender side, outside towards the wheels. So this is going to end up with some undercoating on it. So that'll be another day as well. But for now, that's going to wrap it up for this episode. It is Christmas weekend, so I hope everybody watching has had a good weekend so far. Maybe you're with family, maybe you're not with family and watching me instead. Either way, thank you for watching. Have a great holiday season, and we will see you. Maybe I'll have a video for New Year's weekend. Otherwise, we will see you at the beginning of 2023. Take care, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.